a cold front is moving in for the next 7 days, and I won't really be working outside much. It seemed like a great time to sew the next item in my slow fashion wardrobe. I've chosen a peasant top to be my top, so I went into town to kind of prepare for the cold and get everything I needed in case we have like ice or serious snow or something. And I went to the thrift store, big surprise, and I picked these up. So I got this one, and then I actually already had this one. I got it at the thrift store several days ago. So these are going to be my fabric for the peasant tops. They're all 100% cotton. I might have annoyed the thrift store lady a little bit because they had them like rolled up and taped with masking tape. And I had to kind of untape them and unroll them a little bit to find the tags so I could see what the fiber content was. But I rolled them back up and taped them. So anyway, the one thing that is going to be new about this project, I do have my pattern ready, is I'm going to actually shirr the bodice with elastic thread. I've never used elastic thread before, so I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but I hope you follow along and we'll find out together. So I've divided this sheet into 3 pieces. I just clip it and tear it because this kind of fabric tears straight. And here are my 2 pattern pieces. This is the front and back. And the really great thing about this shirt is there's like no front or back. So you can put it on either way. And when I spill something down the front, I can turn it around and no one will know. So, and then this is the sleeve piece. And these are just butcher paper, and then it has tape on it to stiffen it because I like my pattern pieces to be more like stencils. And so to cut this out, I actually cut 2 pieces at once and if I had an ironing board, I'd probably iron this, but I don't. And so I just have to smooth it. So I'm gonna fold it this way and then try and smooth out these edges as much as I can. And I hope. And then go ahead and fold it this way because both of these pieces go on the fold. And then smooth it out so I don't have any huge wrinkles. And then here's the sleeve. Just go ahead and match that. Because there are 2 folds here, so I'm cutting both pieces out at once. And then here is the bodice piece right here. So, and the nice thing about having such stiff pattern pieces is I can just hold them down and trace around them. The tissue paper ones always just annoyed me because you have to pin them on or something. It's so annoying. So I wouldn't do it this way with a pattern that's structured. But since this is such a free flowing pattern, there's a lot of room for error. So I can cut both pieces out at once. Anything that's more structured, you're going to want to, cut just one layer. So here we go. Oh, well, I'll do that in a minute. The other thing that I do, and I'll show you. So I don't really need any markings but one on this pattern. I do mark the bodice because, believe it or not, once you get these pieces cut out, it's kind of not super easy to tell the sleeve from the bodice. And I have sewn like 2 sleeves together before, and that I hate ripping stitches. So here are my sleeves. Here's the bodice. Okay, and then this piece can be maybe used for something, I don't know, patches or applique. And then the one thing I'm going to do is I just put a little X like this, and then I open it up and put an X here, and that way I know this is the bodice, and this fabric doesn't matter right or wrong side, it's the same, but if you had one, and then so I know that a non-X goes to an X. And so here are my 4 pieces ready to go. Okay, this pattern only has 6 seams. It has 4 sleeve to bodice seams, and then it has 2 side seams. So we're going to do all 4 sleeve to bodice seams first. And I don't use pins very often. I find it more trouble than it's worth for most seams unless it's something like super intricate. So just back stitch a couple of stitches and then kind of, I always kind of think of sewing as like you're sculpting fabric, because you're taking something that lies flat and you're fixing it so that it fits on a 3-dimensional object. So you do have to kind of watch and make sure you don't get puckers. But other than that, and I use a very small seam allowance, just basically run it to the edge of my feed dog. A couple back stitches. And there we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim this further, just a small, and I'll finish those edges once I get the other 3 seams done. Okay, now that we've gotten all of them sewn together and just pull it out, make sure nothing's twisted, we're going to go ahead and finish these seams with a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to put my stitch length width to 6, and then I'm going to switch over to zigzag. I don't really mess with my length. I just kind of use the same length for everything. And let's finish these stitch edges. Run that basically right up to the stitching. And I don't backstitch the zigzag or anything because these edges are going to be either folded over or zigzagged. So then you get a nice finish, and I'm going to do the other 3 seams like this, and we'll go and press. So now that all the bodice to sleeve seams are sewn, I'm going to go to my very makeshift ironing board here and just press these seams. Now, a lot of garments, you need to press the seams as you sew them. This one is so it has so much volume that you can really get to the seams. And I press all of the seams towards the sleeves, so away from the X. Just give it a good press with my little baby iron here. A little steam. And then I press it to the back, on the back, and then I go ahead and flip each one and just press them here. Just so I know I get a good press, because you're really not going to have much of a chance to press these again. So it's really important to press them during the sewing process. Just makes your garment look a lot more professional. Again, away from the X, so this direction. Here we go. A little steam. And then flip it. It doesn't really have to be that pretty on the back. It just kind of starts it, and then you do the best on the front here. And that's going this direction. So I want to make sure that I push it this direction. And these curves kind of make it a little tricky, but you just finesse them. Just finesse them a little bit. It'll be good. Okay. 2 down, 2 to go. Okay, so now it's time to do the side seams. I want to make sure it's all wrong side out. And then kind of, there we go. And the side seams are actually one place that I use a pin, because I go ahead, since I don't really iron my fabric, sometimes it gets wrinkles and that pulls things off. Now you can see right here, this is probably wrinkled when I cut out the pattern, and I just actually trim. This has so much ease that it just doesn't really matter. So clip that off and then match these seams. And then I just throw one little pin in right here to hold it. And then I always sew the sleeves together first. So just line that up. Sometimes they don't match, which is why I match it at the seam and not at the end, because I want that seam to match. And again, I don't really use pins. I reset my sewing machine to straight stitch. And stitches forward, so back stitching, and so one thing you do want to make sure though is that you have your seam allowance on this side. I guess I can take this pin out now. Going the direction that it was pressed in on the top and the bottom. So neither one is. So they go towards the sleeve, which is up. So sometimes you pull this, bring this around, and then lift the presser foot and set it down on top. And there we go. Clip. And then I trim these exactly the same way that I trim the sleeve bodice allowance seam or seams. So just give it a trim. Okay, so we got those side seams finished, and now it's time to press them. And again, it's really important to press these now because there's just no way to press them once once the garment is finished. So kind of takes a little finagling. This would be a million times easier with an ironing board, but I just don't have space for that. And really on this one, it doesn't make much difference which way you press it. I just make sure that I press one this way, and then when I flip it over, I press it the other way so that they both go the same way. And then kind of a little extra steam right here where these seams meet. And then the sleeve. Make sure I press it the same way. Here we go. And I don't press it from the front on this seam because it's just, I don't think it's that necessary. So it's a lot easier. Since this is not a curved seam at all, it presses better than the bodice to sleeve seams. And start at the bottom. Which way did I press this one? Okay, so I'm going to press this one this way. And really, this doesn't make any difference at all, because as long as the seam's pressed, the direction that it's pressed in doesn't matter. There is no front or back on this shirt. You can wear however, so that I personally like that. but again, a little extra attention right here. Did not get those very well matched. Okay, so we have all the seams done. You end up with something like this. Doesn't really look like much, does it? It's the gathering and stuff that makes a difference. So the next step is to just finish all the raw edges with a zigzag stitch. Now that we have all the seams done, I'm just going to finish all these raw edges with a zigzag stitch. And I kind of go through them. If there's anything a little wobbly or kind of weird like this here, I just trim it off before I do the zigzag. Because it just makes it easier and it looks neater. This little pointy thing here. There's another one. That'll make it easier when you go to do your channel. And then I check like the sleeves, make sure they match at the seams. I think I saw one at the bottom. Yeah, this one's off a little. Trim some of these stringies where it's unraveling. And yeah, so there's another area that needs kind of trimmed. And really part of that is just because this fabric doesn't have any stretch. So it didn't stretch, it's just I didn't iron them, so okay. And really you need to take off to make it a free arm. You can start anywhere. And here we go. Okay, so all of these edges are finished, and at some point I might go around and just trim all these little threads. Every fabric is different in how bad it unravels, but this will all be tucked back and it's not really going to show, so I don't know that I'll bother. This one's actually the worst for raveling of any I've worked with so far as sheets go. Maybe because it's a finer thread count, I don't know, but none of this is going to show because it's on the inside of the garment. So the next step is to create our channels on the sleeves and the neckline for the elastic, and then to I just do a really thin hem on this, like and sew that. So it's back to the ironing board. So now we're going to go ahead and press the channels for the elastic on the neckline and the sleeves. And we'll press this bottom for the hem. And I think I'll do that first. If I can find the bottom. There we go. Okay, so for the bottom hem, I just go up, gosh, probably 1/4 of an inch. And just give it a good press all the way around. And then I sew as close to the edge as I can, so it's just a really small hem. And it's easier to... This, like so many other things, would be much easier with a ironing board. But when your choices are to work around things or not do them at all, I choose to work around and put up with some inefficiencies and irritations. Okay, and I'm just going to sew this. It's always best once you press something to go ahead and sew it right away, because as it cools off and you tend to move it around, often the press doesn't stay. So I'm going to sew this first and then come back and press the other channels. So here's how I do the sleeves and the neckline, and it's pretty much the same, so I'll just show you. So I fold it over about a 1/2 inch, and I just eyeball this. Again, this garment does not require precision at all, so it makes it like a really great beginner's garment because it's pretty hard to mess it up. So you just... Now I did try to go ahead and fold it without pressing it as I was sewing, and that didn't work as well, partly because, no, this is going across the sleeve, but as you go to the neckline actually is curved. So when you press it, you're kind of molding the fabric so that it goes where you want it to, and it's very hard to do it if it hasn't been pressed. So you can see this curve here. I'm having to kind of mold this curve. And here's where the curve starts again. So I'm gonna start back here. I got a crease put in here, right here. Okay. Start back here, and then I'm just gonna kind of stretch and mold it. So the only way you can really mess this up is if you get the channel too narrow for your elastic. So I'm going to sew this. You do the sleeves the same way. So I'm going to sew this, and we will go from there. So this is set up the same way as the hem, and I always start at a seam because you got to remember to leave a little space to put in your elastic, and I just sew close to the zigzagging. I usually sew, like, I leave my fabric just right on here. That gives me my width, and that's perfect for the 1/4 inch fabric that I'm using, or the 1/4 inch elastic. So the only tricky part of this is you do have to make sure on the neckline that you keep because the fabric wants to kind of buckle. And I mean, if you get some little creases or wrinkles in, this is certainly not the end of the world, because obviously you're putting in elastic and the whole thing is going to be wrinkled and creased, but better if you don't. And you just kind of fuss with it a little bit and it'll come in line. This fabric's super easy to work with. Now, don't forget to leave some open for your elastic. Okay, so we have this little opening for our elastic. Now, if it looks like it's, see how it's kind of puckering right here? That's because of the curve. That is not an issue at all. So don't even worry about that. I'm going to do the sleeves and then I'll come back with the elastic and show you how I do that. Okay, have all my channels done. Now it's time to put the elastic in. This is where it really starts to look like a garment. So, I mean, obviously it's pretty simple. I've pre-cut my elastic. I know how long each one, so I use 11-inch elastic for the sleeves and I use a 39-inch elastic for the neckline. And I mean, everybody has different body dimensions, so your elastic is going to be a little, and how tight they or loose they like it or whatever. So that's what works for me. And just use a safety pin to thread it through. Find the channel on the sleeves. I always do the channel at the seam just because then it's easy to find. And then if I ever need to adjust it, I kind of know where the channel is too. And you just pull it through. I mean, you know, just work it through. I find that this actually makes my fingers dry after a while, but it's a survivable thing. Okay, so once I get pretty close to the end of the other end of the elastic, I take a pin and go ahead and pin it because I don't want to pull it all the way through. That tends to lead to swearing, actually. So now I have two ends. I go ahead and pull off this safety pin. And I use a needle and thread. You can like attach these on the sewing machine, but I find it very frustrating. It just slips. It's hard to hold. It's like the pins are in the way. So I just go ahead and hand sew them. A few stitches. You know what? I would never say that I was born in the wrong time period because I love modern conveniences. I do. I love machines. I love the fact that, you know, if I had to hand sew this shirt, it would take me probably at least a day, if not 2 days, to sew this shirt. Whereas with my sewing machine, I can actually sew 3 of these in a day if I'm not recording it. So I love, you know, machinery, but I also think that sometimes we use machines just for the sake of using a machine, not because it's actually more efficient, because I don't think using the machine to do the elastic is more efficient in this case, and it's certainly more frustrating. All right. And then you're going to take off your pin, give it a tug, and it just goes right in the channel. So then the last step to this is to go ahead and sew, because see, you can see where the little channel was, the opening. So you just pop that on there. Sew that closed. And there you have your sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead and do these other elastics. I'll show you. And then I will show you how to do the elastic thread on the bottom. So the next step in this process requires a ruler and a marker pen. I use the washable Crayolas. And we are going to mark, and you need to mark on the right side of your garment because you need the top thread to be on the right side because the elastic is only the bottom thread. And so I'm going to mark, and I have my marker actually marked, it's at 6.5 inches. Now, some people draw a full line. I'm not really that precise at much of anything. I think that, so I just do these dotted lines, you know, pretty close together, and then just eyeball them as I'm sewing in it. It's a close enough line. Partly I'm not too worried about it because I wear these under my overalls, so this doesn't really show all that much. And maybe if I wore it out, I would be a little more picky, but probably not because I like things kind of wobbly, so I don't mind imperfection. I think imperfections make things unique, and I'm a great fan of uniqueness, obviously, so okay, almost got this. Okay, so let's get this going. Okay, this is the last step in this garment, so it's the elastic thread. Now, you have to hand wipe. You only use the elastic thread on your bobbin, not on the top thread. You just use your regular top thread. And one thing about this is you do have to hand wind this bobbin. You cannot put it on your machine because you don't actually want it to stretch while it's on the bobbin. It needs to just be even. So let's take that out. So it's you have to hand wind it. I messed around with trying to like wind it on the machine, and there just wasn't any way to do it. So, but you load it just like you would load a regular bobbin. You do have to keep in mind though that this like stretches and snaps back, so you kind of want to leave tails longer than you normally would, and then you're gonna pull it up. What the heck? Let's redo that. Okay, so pull your thread up and then pull it back just like you normally would. Okay, let's put the bobbin cover on. Okay, and can see my dotted line here. So I'm going to make the stitch length all the way to 4. I'm going to up the tension, and I'm going to make sure that my needle is in the center. And this can be kind of finicky. Like, I haven't had a lot of trouble, but I do find that as the bobbin's almost empty, it tends to mess up, and so I can't always get like all of the thread that's in the bobbin through. So, and I still back stitch because you don't want it to let go because it'll just disappear. Does anybody else have problems with their presser foot running away? Because mine does. So I'm just feeding the fabric, you know, going from line to line, making sure it doesn't get caught on anything, drag. And I'm not pulling the fabric, I'm just letting the feed dogs, excuse me, do their work. Halfway there. Now, you want to pull this a little further than you normally would, and I usually hang on to it before I clip it and then let go so it won't snap back inside. So, and then I don't want it to catch on anything under here, so I make sure that I clip my threads. Okay, first one. Now this doesn't look super stretchy, but as we add rows, it gets more gathered. And then there's another little trick I'll show you at the end. So for the second one, I basically set my presser foot the distance away that I want. And then same thing, back stitch, and then I just keep it like I just eyeball the distance. You do have to kind of watch it and make sure that you don't get any like pleats in there. You don't sew, you just kind of smooth it out ahead of your presser foot so you don't get pleats in there. And I'm just, you could certainly draw lines, you know, or whatever if you want more precise. It doesn't matter. Like for me, it's not that big of a deal. But everybody, you know, has their preferences, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just following that line. And back stitching. Okay. Now I do 4 rows, so that gives me kind of like 3 little things. Again, you want to make sure you pull this out further than you would and hang on to it when you clip it so it doesn't snap back into your bobbin compartment. All right, number 3. Okay. Now, even this doesn't look very gathered. I mean, it's much more gathered than with just one row, but there's a secret and I'll show it to you. Okay, the final secret. So we're going to lay this out. And then we're going to take the iron. Oh, let's try and lay it a little flatter. There we go. So we're going to take the iron on steam. You're not going to press. You're just going to put it lightly on there and then steam it. And that shrinks the elastic. And then you get this nice ruching or shirring. I think it's shirring. Okay, same with this side. Although this side kind of shrinks when you do the other side. I think my iron's too full here. And voila. Your shirring or ruching. So I hope you've enjoyed this basically tutorial on this peasant blouse. Here's the finished product. And I love this pattern because, first of all, I think it's super cute. They're very comfortable, and it's such an easy project, especially for beginners, because there aren't very many pieces, there aren't very many seams. You don't have to do the ruching. I don't know that I would recommend that as a beginner, but I would just make it a little longer and wear a belt with it. But the rest of it is so simple, and it teaches you just basic skills that you need. So if you have any questions, if there's anything else you would like to see, please let me know in the comments. I appreciate all your comments. I always try to read them and answer them. So we'll see you next time.